Hello and welcome to Make It Happen. I am excited about today's episode with our featured guest, Jon Acuff, who is the author of Soundtracks, a book that I listened to over the summer that has really changed the way I think about overthinking and has set me up to succeed in new ways. Also probably was very influential in helping me do this show. I am excited for you to hear from him and his genius, but we also have a Pick Your Brain segment, and I share with you a few of my favorite things. Welcome to Make It Happen. Welcome to Pick My Brain. I'm so excited. I love this segment. I love seeing your questions come in. If you want to send me a question, you can email me at michelle@speakmichelle.com. Put Pick My Brain in the subject line and we will maybe talk about it on the air. Today's question comes from Ray from Delta, Colorado. She says, how do I know when to make my side business my full-time thing? I work with a lot of individuals, whether they're working full-time or they're rocking it out as a mom, who have a side hustle that they love, that brings them happiness and joy. And they're often asking me that very same question. How do I know when it's time to make my side hustle my full-time thing? First and foremost, I think you have to ask yourself, do you love this like a hobby? And you're ready to commit to growing it into a full business? Or is it really good for you to have this as a side hobby? Some people love their full-time work and having something on the side just gives them a little something extra to do. And then when they make it their full-time thing, they regret it and wish they had just kept it as a hobby. Others are like, you know what? I love this so much and it makes me so happy and fulfilled. And I like my full-time job, or I like who I am and what I'm doing, but I know that there's more that I can do here. If you feel the call to expand, that can be a great sign that you're ready to make it full-time. But before you do, I have a tip. Sit down and figure out what that would look like. I had a client who consulted with me a long time ago, and I share this story often but it is really a great reality about how you know if you can transition from part-time to full-time in something that you're doing on the side. She was making hair bows. Now, it sounds silly, but stay with me for a minute. She was making hair bows and she was making $1,000 a month. It was something that she could do on the side. She'd put her kids to bed. She'd make hair bows at night while she was watching TV and hanging out with her husband. She would go do shows on the weekend and sell them online. And she loved having the extra money. And she thought, Michelle, it would be so great if I could make $5,000 a month making hair bows. And I said, well, if you are making $1,000 now, how many hair bows do you have to make? And she goes, 100 to 250. And so we looked at that. I mean, some of them are cheaper than others. And so I said, okay, well, are you ready to quadruple or 5 times that? Could you potentially make or hire out and make over 1,000 bows? And she thought about it for a minute and she thought, you know what? I don't want to make any more bows than I'm already making. And I don't want to hire it out because then my margins are going to be gone. And she was able to identify that that was something that she wanted to keep as a side hustle. Now, there are other people who start in a direct sales company and they're doing it on the side. They're making a few $100s and they're wondering, is it worth to invest more time? If you love the products and you want to actually build a business, which is different than consuming, and you're committed to growing it like you would a job or a different business, then it is time for you to step up to the plate. But again, sit down, take a quick minute, create just a tiny little business plan, know exactly how much time you're willing to invest and what you can bring back from it. Sit down and decide how you would market it in a new way, because the work that you've done now is likely local and connections and the people that you contact with. But are you willing to step up the marketing game and take your business to the next level? If you are, I'm going to cheer you on and invite you to do that. It is totally easy to shift if you are ready and you set yourself up to succeed. Great question. Thank you so much for sending that in, Ray, and we appreciate you watching, and we'd love to answer your questions. Send them in. Today's episode is brought to you by Holistic You Wellness. I have had the opportunity over the last 4 or 5 months to get to know Laura, who is the creator of this business. And I love the passion that she brings to help individuals become their best selves. She has everything from nutritional consults to organizational consults, and also how you want to move your body in new ways. And I think she is the greatest source for someone who's ready to do something new, but just wants a little nudge on how to do it. One simple session will help you think through your goals and make sure that you're on the right track for you. Sometimes we do things because the internet told us to do them, and we really need a professional to sit by our sides and say, is this the right thing for you? If you'd like to know more about Holistic You Wellness, go to holisticuwellness.com and reach out to Laura and tell her you heard it here, right here on Make It Happen. It is time for a few of my favorite things, and I am so excited. So number one is t-shirts. I absolutely love t-shirts, and I posted my love for t-shirts on the World Wide Web, and one of my friends said, "You're so basic," which I think is a dig nowadays, but I responded to her basically, "Awesome." I think t-shirts are fantastic, and one of the things we talked about on today's show with Jon Acuff is all about having symbols, and I didn't know this when I started listening, but symbols to me and my t-shirts are great. I love putting positive things out there, especially after a year where most of my face was covered and I couldn't even smile. I wanted people to think happy thoughts, and I love t-shirts. Get them all. This particular t-shirt is something that people stop me and ask me where I got it. It's from Maker Valley, which is a division of Stately Type. You can find them online at statelytype.com. This shirt is sadly retired and they are not currently selling it, but they have some other awesome shirts there. But I think you can, if you want to express yourself through t-shirts, go for it. They're one of my favorite things. Second, I always share with you a little bit of a treat. This is actually a healthy one, believe it or not. I usually have a soda in one hand and a gummy in another. But when I am grabbing something healthy, especially on my way out the door, I love the Everything But the Bagel Nut Duo from Trader Joe's. I will try not to only talk about Trader Joe's when we're doing favorite things, but I love them. It is almonds and cashews covered in everything but the bagel seasoning. They're not super overpowering, but just provide a little bit of season to make me feel like my nuts actually taste delicious. So if you haven't tried them, I recommend Everything But the Bagel Nut Duo. Now, I found them in other places from other brands. So if you don't have a Trader Joe's near you, do not cry. You can probably find Everything But the Bagel Nuts somewhere. The third thing I want to share with you is a little known thing called the US Postal Service. I am absolutely in love with sending mail. My favorite thing is that I just got to watch both members of my team look at me like, "Are you kidding?" She just said the US Postal Service. Writing a letter is a lost art, but receiving mail makes people so happy. So today I'm going to challenge you to write a letter, put a stamp on it, and send it off. Now that probably sounds like a really big task, but most grocery stores even sell stamps. So the next time you're picking up your groceries and those Everything But the Bagel nuts, grab a couple of stamps and send a handwritten note. I love getting mail. I also love getting emails. So if you'd love to send me thoughts and comments about the show, people that you'd like to see, please email me at michelle@speakmichelle.com. I would also love to hear what some of your favorite things are, so please share in the comments below. I would love to try new things. You can also find additional things that I review with my friend Amy at Mom's Opinions Matter. I am excited for today's episode with Jon Acuff. I found him a couple of months ago on a road trip. I asked a friend for a book to listen to while I was driving, and she recommended soundtracks. And while I listened there and back and digested the entire thing on that trip while my kids were watching shows in the back, I really had good intentions to engage with them and have meaningful conversations, but I was loving what I was listening to. So I let them fry their brains. And what I loved about that process is hearing this book and listening to this author who I have now looked at all other books that he has. He is a New York Times bestselling author. He is a speaker like me, so he has great stories about traveling and speaking the world, fun interests, a Lego master, and other things. And so I don't know where we're going to go in this conversation today, but I'm excited to introduce you to Jon Acuff. Jon, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me today, Michelle. I'm looking forward to it.
I am so excited. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. We scheduled this, I think, like 8 weeks ago. And as I have been thinking about the things that I want to talk about, I want to start here. I know that there are lots of books out there on positive attitudes and positive thinking, but I love your approach to looking at the ways that we're overthinking in our lives. And so I'd love for you to share, what are some of the things that this audience should know about how they're getting stuck in overthinking, or even identifying it, so that they can figure out how to reframe and get back into their superpowers?
Well, I mean, I think first is that everybody does it. I think overthinking is one of those things that everybody thinks they're the only one. And even just knowing, oh, I'm not the only one, is super helpful. So part of what started this process for me writing this book was the PhD, Mike Peasley, who helps me do research. We asked 10,000 people if they struggle with overthinking, and 99.5% of people said yes. And this was before 2020. If anything, 2020 was catnip for overthinking. And so the first thing I'd say is everybody does it. I think that's really important to know. I define it as when what you think gets in the way of what you want. And then the third thing I'd say is it's different from being detailed or prepared. A bunch of people pushed back and said, wait a second. I just like to be prepared. I like to be organized. I like to be detailed. And I always say, that's great. The difference between being prepared, and overthinking is that being prepared leads to an action. Overthinking leads to more overthinking. So if you show me a trail of actions and say, I wrote the book, I did the diet, I started the podcast, whatever, great, you're prepared, be detailed. If you're stuck in a loop of overthinking, it's completely different.
I can identify with that. And I think you're right in the sense that I am overthinking way more than I ever used to, because I had a 2020 where it didn't quite go the way that I wanted it to. And so now I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to set these goals and it's going to be great. And I'm like, what if this happens? And what if that happens? And what if all these things? And so I can see the ways that my overthinking is leading me into complete indecision. And in some cases, paralysis. And then I get caught going, okay, well, I just won't make any choices and I'll just float on and not do anything else. And I think that, we can get caught into those traps before there's crazy things going on. So what thoughts do you have for people who are navigating the weird world that we live in? And sometimes they're like, listen, this isn't overthinking. This is real life. The world is really weird. How do we check back into reality? And even if there are things that are happening that are crazy, how do we manage and channel our brains into good things?
Well, so the book essentially talks about doing three things: retiring broken soundtracks, and the soundtrack is just my phrase for repetitive thought, replacing it with a new soundtrack, and repeating the new one so often as it becomes as automatic as the old one. So somebody could say, okay, well, how do I even identify a broken soundtrack? And here's a super simple, really easy 30-second activity. All you do is write down something you want to do. So write down a desire you have. I want to write a book. I want to start a podcast. I want to ask the person out. I want to be a public speaker. I want to be a mom. I want, it can be big, small. I want to move to Salt Lake City like the rest of the universe and have the real estate be even crazier because there's 4 houses available. Like, you say, I want to do this, and then listen to your first thoughts. Listen to your reaction, because every reaction is an education. And if your reaction is, you're too old to do that, you're too young to do that, you don't have enough experience to do that, you live in the wrong city, other people have already done that, you'd never be like, if it's not pushing you in the direction you want to go, you might have a broken soundtrack that deserves being retired. And so for me, the questions we found really helpful there are what I would call Trojan horse questions. Really simple words, really simple ideas. But if you sit with them for a second, you realize there's truth inside. And so the 3 questions are: number 1, is the soundtrack that I'm listening to, is the story I'm telling myself true? Is it true? Is it actually true? The second question is it helpful? There are some things in life that are true, but aren't helpful. For instance, I talked to a manager of a company, and 12 years ago, he got fired. And he said, from that moment on, every time I see a door close at work and I'm not in that meeting, I think I could be getting fired. I could be getting fired again. Is it true he could be fired again? Of course, we could all be fired. Is it helpful for him to spend 10 minutes a day, 5 days a week, 12 years in a row? That's 62 8-hour workdays. Like, we try to save 14 seconds with a new app that does time management. He could save 62 8-hour workdays by not listening to that soundtrack. It's not helpful. Third question, is it kind? If I said it to a friend, would they still want to be my friend? And if you can't say yes to those 3 things, you probably have a broken soundtrack that you need to retire.
I love those questions. And I repeat those questions in my mind, and they sound like you because I heard you say them. So I can hear you like you're a friend saying, wait a minute, is this true? Is this helpful? Is this kind? And I love that because it shifts me back into a good, healthy place for me to be able to make a decision rather than staying in there, because I can keep the crazy soundtracks going as long as I want. And so if I can shift them back, then I find that I am in a much healthier place to move forward. And I think that's what we kind of all need.
And I do that to myself. I use it in my own life. Just the other day, I had to take my sister to the airport at 3:30 a.m. And I started to say, I never get good sleep when I have to do an early morning run. I never do. And I thought, that's a broken soundtrack. And it's not true. Never. Every single time. Like, that's not factually true. So what if I replace it with, I sometimes have a hard time falling asleep when I have an early get up? Okay, that's better. What if I got it to, I could even work it to a positive, like, I have a good alarm clock and I'm so grateful I do, versus going, I never, because when you practice that, your brain kicks in with cognitive bias and finds all these examples of the negative thing you're believing. And so that was one I just changed just the other day. And so for me, it's something I'm actually using in my life. And it's been fun to have other people go, hey, here's one I tried. Here's one I rewrote. It's been a really neat experience.
I love that. And I think that's a great story and a way that you can use it. Because in my mind, I can think about all the ways that I need to take broken soundtracks and replace them with good soundtracks in my business and in my decision-making process. But that's just in a simple everyday life that can help you just have a positive thought about what you're doing. And even taking it as far as going, I'm glad that I have an alarm clock so I can spend this time with my sister or whatever that is. Getting your brain into that good, healthy place will just help you feel happier. And I think that's one of the things that I loved about listening to your book was as I put some of these things into practice, and I've read other books about positive thinking and I know how to do that. And I'm a happiness junkie myself. And so I can get myself and talk myself into good places. But what I wasn't doing super well is identifying the soundtracks that no longer serve me and getting rid of them, because it can be really easy to just go, okay, I'm going to think this instead, but I haven't really gotten rid of those broken soundtracks. And some of them keep coming back. So when you're talking to people that are grasping the concept and they're getting it and they're wanting to do that, do you have extra tips? And we'll talk about symbols in a minute because you can bring that up if that's it. But what do you say to someone who says, yeah, I'm getting it, but I'm still getting stuck and I don't want to be stuck anymore?
Well, I mean, one I say is give yourself patience, give yourself grace. Sometimes I do truly believe there are times where learning one new thing can change everything. And an example of that would be, I had a really difficult coworker, really challenging, really bad attitude, so hard to get along with. And I learned that his wife had cancer. And that changed everything. That one bit of knowledge changed everything. But there's other times where you've believed something for 10 years and you bring this tiny, fresh, new soundtrack and you put it against the one that's been doing push-ups in the prison yard for 10 years and you go, it's not working. And I always tell people, a soundtrack I listen to is don't give the problem a year and the solution a week. And that works across every goal. I meet people all the time. They'll say, Jon, this diet isn't working. I'll say, well, how long have you been doing? They'll say 10 days, or this exercise isn't working 10 days. I'll say, how long did it take you to, gain the weight? And say 10 years. And that's so unkind to yourself. So first give yourself some time and some grace. It's not an automatic thing for a lot of these. So you get to practice it. I think that mindset is a practice. It's not something that's instant. And that was one of the things that helped me with mine was a man named David Thomas, who's a counselor here in Nashville, said that we want negative thoughts to be a switch. We want to find the one thing that turns off the switch. And he said, but it's not a switch. And he said, when you look for a switch mentality, you're constantly disappointed because what happens is you go, okay, yoga is going to be the switch. And you do yoga and you feel better for a week or maybe even a whole month, but then life gets stressful again because life is stressful. Life is messy. If you're a public speaker, like I'm a public speaker, then things got canceled and things got put on pause. And there was no degree of positivity that would make a client hold an event. You couldn't be like, oh, wait a second, I have a great attitude. So you're going to have to recall the Ramada and tell them you are having 600 people in that room together because I have a positive attitude. That wasn't going to work. And so he said, it's much better to think of life as a dial, that there's times when it gets loud, it gets to an 11 and we get to turn it down and we get to figure out, okay, what are some of the ways that I turn it down? So for me, I try to right out of the gate, give people that sense of, okay, it's not a switch. It is a practice. And when that old soundtrack gets loud again, because it might get loud again, I have some tangible things I can do, things I've written down. I like to leave myself clues. I don't want me in the middle of a stressful crisis to then go, let me try to remember the things that help. No, I want in case of emergency, break glass kind of situation where I can go, oh, that's right. That's why, I don't, for me, I have on my wall, I'll grab one right now. And it just says, ask for more. Ask for more. And I wrote that on August 27th, 2020. So we passed the year anniversary just the other day, but I found myself undervaluing my work in negotiations. And so this isn't sexy. This isn't hooky. Nobody, that's not interesting. But for me, those 3 words were a reminder of ask for more. It's okay to ask for more. You need to be encouraged to ask for more. So for me, I never try to do one thing one way and go, okay, I hope this soundtrack works. I have as many, sources of help that I need. I always tell people, stack the deck in your favor, stack it in your favor and make it as easy as possible for yourself. And that's what I have to do with that particular soundtrack.
I love that. And I think you're right. I think we once we identify where we're getting caught, it's easy to go, okay, I can fix that and it'll never be a problem again. But the reality is we have to retrain and get our brains in the right space. And it might take to your point, years to do what it took years to undo. So
it might go faster than you want. It goes both
Right.
ways. And so, but you don't know at the outset. I just know the work is worth it. The work is worth it. And so, okay,
Absolutely.
I'm going to do the work. I can't predict when it's going to happen. In the same way that nobody listening right now should think they have control over most things after the last 2 years. Like if you thought you had control, at least one of the benefits of the last 2 years is you no longer like, no, I kind of control the universe. Like the joke I always do is that makeup sales are all jacked up right now. So like eye makeup is up 200% and lipstick is down like 50%. And because nobody sees your mouth with a mask and everybody sees your eyes, and nobody at like Maybelline or MAC 2 years ago was like, I think our mouth division is going to have a tough year, but our eyeball division is going to crush. Like nobody saw that coming. So you just have to go, okay, I have control over these things. I have control over my thoughts. I get to choose those. I don't have control over these other things. So I'm not going to overthink them. I'm going to focus on the things I can control.
Mm-hmm. And I love you saying, okay, so what thought will help me in this moment? Ask for more, or everything's always working out for me, which I'm working on saying that one over and over again. Mm-hmm. But you don't just say them, you write them down, you put them in a place you're going to see them. You don't just hope that thought is going to stick with you. You create symbols and systems. Tell people more about how you can take just a simple thought and really help it to have sticking power.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I always say is fear comes free, hope takes work. You don't have to look for negativity. It will find you. You've been in the grocery store, picking out food, and all of a sudden had your brain go, hey, remember that time you failed like 3 years ago spectacularly? How about you think about that? You didn't have to look for that. But when it comes to hope and positivity, that takes work. And so for me, an example with a symbol, I talk about how the best brands in the world have known that for years, that like the Nike swoosh is a symbol. A Yeti sticker is a symbol. I joked about that in the book, that they found a way to convince people to tell other people via a sticker on their car how they refrigerate things. Nobody did that in the 90s. Nobody was like, I'm an igloo person. This is how I keep things cold. Wanted you to know. But they realized that their brand is a symbol. And so a symbol for me would be, I had a soundtrack that I wrote down called Don't Miss It. 2 weeks before I had this book coming out, I was going on a family vacation to Jackson Hole with my family. And I knew I was very likely going to be physically present and emotionally, mentally absent, because I'm going to be thinking about the book release, thinking about the book, because it's a big project. It's a multi-year project. It's a pandemic. It's challenging. And so I wrote down, don't miss it. And I practiced that. I said, okay, don't miss it. Don't miss it. And then when I was in Jackson Hole, I saw all these pine cones on the street, and I was present enough to realize, wow, they're different than the ones I have home in Nashville. Like they look completely different. So I picked one up and it's on my desk, because I know there's going to be other times when I'm tempted to miss something. So I want this reminder of, I didn't miss that vacation. I cannot miss this other thing. I can be present. And this gives me another chance to kind of touch base with this, where I need those positivity clues, because I can't hold my breath and hope that as the world is loud, like if you think about all the negativity you experience versus the positivity you experience, I'd rather stack the odds again in my favor. I'd rather have that pine cone and go, oh, that's right. And now I've done another repetition. Now I've told you the story and it's fresh to me again, And so I think we hope sometimes we'll remember the good things, and I'd rather we go, no, I love the good thing enough to make it a little easier. And there's so many examples in the book from people that said, and, a woman said, I got a rock on the top of a mountain from a difficult climb as a reminder that there's beauty at the top and it's worth it. And it's not complicated. She didn't pay. The rocks are free. Like the pine cones, $0. They had them everywhere. They were available everywhere. And so little symbols like that can go a long way.
I think that's great, because we want to be successful and set yourself up to succeed. And what are the tools that will help you? What will help you remember? I've used the phrase, make it happen forever. I wrote a book called The Make It Happen Blueprint, and those 3 words are great. And I've got them on a wall and a plaque and stitched on a pillow. And not that you have to have all those things, but I also liked that I can have more than one. It's not just one thought or one phrase. I mean, I think if I were to turn around and look at your desk, you probably have 10 up there, maybe even 20.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, so I mean, so this one is November 6, 2019. And it says, I love writing this book, because while I was writing the book, there were times when it felt super challenging, and it would be easy for me to forget this is a privilege to write a book. Like, this is an exciting, fun thing. And I would forget that. And I would go, oh, and writers are the worst at that. They say things like, got to go to the coal mine, or like, oh, writing's easy. All you do is open up a vein and bleed. Like, oh, we're so melodramatic that I wanted a simple reminder. No, I love this. Like, this is a joy. I'm going to stay connected to this joy. So yeah, and then I have a wall right here. There's 70, and I didn't write them all. If I hear a good one, I'll write it down and I'll go, oh, that's interesting. I'll remember that. They're not all amazing. They're not going to win any awards, but they're just reminders for me of, oh, okay, like that's helpful. I talked to Kathy Heller, another podcaster and business owner, the other day, and she said, I do two things, free and expensive. And I was like, oh, that's good. She was like, I'm free, I do podcasts, there's free content, but if you're going to get with me, it's going to be expensive. And I was like, free or expensive is fantastic. Like, I'll add that to my ask for more. So yeah, I'm a collector. Definitely.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I started with you with soundtracks, but I know you have other work. Is there other work that you do or things that you've had in the past that you love, that you wish other people would know about? If so, what is that? Tell us about it.
Yeah, all of it. I mean, I wish they'd buy everything in bulk, like for your whole family, like just truckloads. I mean, like a wheelbarrow would be nice. I don't know, whatever people want to buy. I mean, for me, the other, like, if I like the question, like, okay, well, if there's one more thing. For me, the book finish, I think is really fun. I realized I was terrible at finishing goals, and we as a culture over celebrate the beginning and we don't talk about the end. We say things like, well begun is half done, or like the hardest part of any journey is the first step. And that's not true. Like, well begun is half done. If a surgeon said to you, once I've made the first incision, I'm like halfway done, you'd be like, where did you go to school? The hardest part of any journey is the first step. That's not even a little true. We have kickoff parties. We have launch parties. Like, I've never had a middle party. I've never had a boss go, hey, we're at the worst part of the project. Time for middle cake. Like, where do people cheer at races? At the beginning, at the finish line. The middle is long and lonely. So Mike Peasley, this PhD that works with me, we did a research study where we studied nearly 900 people for 6 months as they worked on their goals to answer the question, can you do some things to go from being a chronic starter into a consistent finisher? And it was really fun to go, wow, there are some things you can do. And it helped me in my own life. I mean, I look for three things in a book idea. And I think they're the same thing. If you're going to launch a business, if you're going to do a side hustle, I look for a personal connection. Am I deeply connected to the content? Because you're going to talk about it for years. Like you mentioned, you have Make It Happen on a wall in a podcast. Like, you have to be deeply personally connected. The second thing is there a need? Do people actually need this thing? And the third is there a spot in the marketplace? So I was not a good finisher. The audience needed it. 92% of all New Year's resolutions fail, according to the University of Scranton. And then I looked at the marketplace, which is Amazon for me, and I looked up the word finish, and the only thing that came up was dishwasher detergent, because we over celebrate the beginning and we ignore the end. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm going to do this. So yeah, that would be, for me, that's another one of those where if you ever have a hard time finishing goals, I think it's a fun roadmap.
Awesome. Thank you. Before we end the conversation on soundtracks itself, I loved the section on the anthem and have personal experience with sharing the anthem. In fact, the week that I started listening to your book, it was a particularly hard week. And I was like, oh, it's okay. I can just stay in bed. Like, I'll just stay in bed. Bed's great. Bed's comfortable. Bed doesn't bother me.
Bed knows me. Doesn't ask questions.
It doesn't talk back. I mean, all the things. Bed's great. And so, and it was just like a year into the pandemic and everything's hard and my goals aren't working and the speaking business hasn't come back. And I was like, all right, I'll put his anthem to the test. And so I started saying anthem morning and afternoon. And 2 days in, I just felt better. Like I just felt like everything was going to be okay. And the world wasn't different. The world was still hard and weird, but I got to a place of, to what you were saying, of hope. And so I'd love for you to share with the audience a little bit about the anthem. Sure. And we'll of course link in the show notes how to get the book, how to get finished, and a little bit more about you, but tell them about the anthem, because I think that really is life-changing.
Yeah. So I didn't want to study positive thinking. I mean, I'm a sarcastic person. Like I'm pretty jaded. Like I'm pretty mopey naturally. Like I have to work pretty hard to be positive. Like I tend to like, my base level is like counting crows around here. Like that's how, like very melodramatic mopey, but I work really hard at positivity because I see the value. But I grew up thinking, oh, it's cheesy. Like I grew up with Seinfeld, Serenity Now, or like Saturday Night Live. I'm good enough. I'm smart enough. Doggone it. People like me. but I kept running into people that I really respected that had the kind of lives I was trying to build. And I'd go, hey, what do you think about affirmations? Or what do you think? And off camera, off mic, they'd go, well, I got a mantra I say, or I got a pep talk I give myself every afternoon. And I was like, oh no, I'm going to have to study this. And so I went to what I feel like is one of the sources of great affirmations, Zig Ziglar. I had a chance to have lunch with he and his wife before he passed away a few years ago. I interviewed his son. I tested his in my own life. And then I came up with a bunch of my own affirmations, kind of whittled it down with a bunch of feedback. And then we tested it with a few thousand people to go, if you have a new anthem, 10 statements, and they're not long statements, they're really simple statements. Like one of them is, I'm the CEO of me and I'm the best boss. And I realized like I was the worst boss to me. Like if I had a boss that treated me like I treat me, I would quit every day. I would be like, this guy, I wouldn't make it to lunch. I'd be like, this guy sucks. And I'd be quitting. And so they became this practice that we got a couple thousand people to do, and then really realized, wow, it is helpful. And I think ultimately what's helpful about it is that sometimes your brain just grabs the last song that's on top. And so there's situations where you're stuck or something's frustrating and your brain goes, I'm going to grab the last song you've been listening to. And if the last song is Momentum is Messy, like it's always messy, then when it's messy, you don't feel like a failure. You go, oh, that's right. Like growing a podcast is messy. The podcast you've successfully grown, I mean, like millions of downloads is not easy. Like it's messy. And I'm sure there's been times where you've been like, oh, every other podcast in the world is perfect and they get it right. Tim Ferriss's podcast records itself magically. You like, and you go, no. Momentum is messy. Okay. Momentum is messy. That's what the new anthem was or is.
I love that. And the CEO line is one of my favorites too. I also I love number 10. That's like the best response to obstacles is to do it anyway. Yeah. And I think anytime we're getting excited about something that we want to do, there still will be obstacles. It's not just sunshine and roses the second you say, hey, this is what I'm doing, but doing it anyway will help push past and help you grow stronger. And so anyway, the anthem's great. And I think everybody needs an anthem, whether you do Jon's or you make your own. The things that you say to yourself are so, so powerful. Well, before we close, is there any one last thing that maybe we didn't talk about that you're super passionate about, that you get excited? What would be your final thought to close and leave with our audience?
Yeah. So I have a podcast called All It Takes Is a Goal. And I think if you're going to listen to one episode and relate it to the book, Colleen Berry is somebody I interviewed. And Colleen is in the first chapter of the book. And Colleen, a few years ago, during the dot-com bust, lost her job as a documentary filmmaker. So amazing job, like dream job. She showed a film in Cannes or however you say it, Cannes, I guess, and had this amazing life and lost her job. And she had to take 3 or 4 other jobs and making pizza. And she was a receptionist. And at a receptionist job, she decided to change her mindset, change her soundtracks. And she's now the CEO of that company. And so she was one of those episodes where I was taking so many notes, like, oh my gosh. And so if you were, going through a challenge right now and you're like, things are really frustrating, or I need some encouragement, the Colleen Berry episode of my podcast, All It Takes Is a Goal, to me is like nitro. It's just nitro encouragement. So I'd encourage you to check out my podcast.
I love that. I will also give a little plug for your month-long challenges that you do from time to time.
Oh, yeah.
So you do a couple. I know we're mid-September. It's not too late, but please follow Jon on all of the social media channels. Again, they're all linked below, because he does some cool stuff in his free category that's not expensive, that I think is absolutely wild and will help you as you are constantly working through and moving forward. Jon, thank you so much for being on Make It Happen.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Michelle.
Thank you so much for being part of Make It Happen today. I hope you got a tip or two that will help you put your brain in the right space so that you can make it happen. We also would love for you to subscribe so that you can make sure you hear about our latest episodes. And I would be honored if you would leave a review. But don't just tell that you think the show is great. I would love for you to share a specific takeaway, something that you got from today's episode that will help people be interested in listening and tuning in. Thank you so much for your thoughts and feedback, and thank you for your time. I'm cheering you on as you make it happen.